following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
I am back, and you are comfortably zoned with me, the Zig Zag Man, in Alameda, California, right across the bay from San Francisco, and across the moat from Oakland. I am joined by David C. Adams, Jr., a USC tutor of athletes. Now, would you explain that to me, David? And we'll get to know each other a little bit.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I do. I'm a licensed broker of about 30 years, a little bit over that. And in the interim, I just decided I wanted to teach economics, and it just fell into my lap that I was able to work with, primarily a lot of student athletes, that sort of thing. So I teach economics, finance, that sort of thing.
We have, in the past 2 years, discussed college athleticism ad nauseum on these networks. And I want to get some basic definitions from you as you see it. What do you consider a student athlete to be in today's day and age? I'll let you take that, and we'll start from there.
Well, obviously it's a combination of two things. Obviously, in order to reach the levels that they've obtained, if they reach the college level, most of them are scholarship athletes. In addition to that, of course, they've got to deal with their elective college of choice, whatever their specialty is going to be in life, in case they don't make it and say the next professional level step up. So there's a lot of they've got to be highly skilled, and as you know, you got to be skilled in at least 2 or 3 different areas. So it's both academic and athletic. So a lot of athletes don't get a lot of credit for that because of the stereotypes that are associated with it, and they think they're just dumb or ignorant creatures. But you look at the type of program, especially when you look at the offensive schematics or defensive schematics in which they've got to learn, they generally have to acquire the knowledge or absorb a lot of information based on their specific area. At the same time, of course, so that doesn't come easy, but at the same time, they've got to maintain a certain particular grade point average in order to maintain their eligibility as well as their scholarships. So I consider...
May I ask you this? Are most of the student athletes looking towards that next rung, as you mentioned, the NFL, playing in Europe, this, that, and the other thing, and not just in football, in all sports? Are scholarship athletes being cheated in a way because instead of staying in the moment and becoming educated, becoming socially adaptable, this, that, and the other thing, they're looking towards a goal that may not be realized just by the numbers in front of them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the numbers when I was going through college ball, football specifically, it's about 10% of the collective amount of the base of football athletes were going to make it to the next tier. And even if you make it to the next tier, there's no guarantee you're going to really make any money. At least not when I was playing, because of the fact that it's generally only the ball players from the first round that they're in the first selected players from the first round that actually really make any money. The others have got to grab their lunch pail and try and fight their way to maintain a status there. So there's a lot of areas there that,
Yeah, I was just going to ask you if you could put yourself back in time towards your senior year when you were being recruited. What was your mindset? Were you thinking of the pros? Were you using college as a stepping stone? And what did you learn once you got into college that was either sobering or encouraging along those lines?
Well, yeah, I came out. I was out of Europe. My parents were Air Force, so I was living in England at the time, and
Huh.
We had something.
I'm an old airman. Congratulations to your dad for being a veteran. I wore the blue during the Vietnam era.
There you go.
So we have an affinity. Had you played high school ball in Europe, or what was?
Yes, I played 4 sports. We had, it was funny back then, a lot of people, when I came to USC, it was the same thing. People had a perspective of it. Did they have American football back then? Yeah, we did. Down all the, it was competitive. We had a conference for all the military bases. They competed against each other and everything. It was football, wrestling, track, basketball, baseball during the summer. I played 4 sports in high school. I was their student athlete of the year, but so I had a high affinity or perspective that I would, there was a possibility of making it to the next level. But growing up in a military background, especially my parents, I was pretty grounded. I was going to be the first one in our family to ever possibly attain a bachelor's degree. So I was always told that when you get to the next level, regardless of how good you are, there's the possibility there's going to always be somebody better. So that's pretty much exactly what I found when I entered as a running back at USC. I was as a freshman. My freshman year, I was playing behind a little-known guy named Marcus Allen, and he was a redshirt sophomore. So, you kind of get a perspective that you better just make sure you get your education while you're there. And if you are fortunate enough to be able to make it to the next level, great. But if not, you just didn't want to end up pumping gas, which at that particular time, the examination or perspective of a lot of athletes was that they were all going to go pro and life would be wonderful. So academics wasn't really important. My family stressed the exact opposite. So I had to make sure I had myself covered just in case. And, of course, it didn't really work out as far as I wanted to, but I don't have any regrets.
Did you ever consider going into coaching yourself?
No,
Not coaching yourself, but coaching.
No, no, I didn't. I never looked at that because I was always intrigued by businessmen and suits and carrying the briefcase, that sort of thing. And I always thought, hey, this is really nice and whatnot. And if it does not work out, and I understood that at that time, and the statistics may have changed with sports medicine now to keep you going, but I was always told that perspective is the average life expectancy of a running back, which I was about 3.5 years. So it wasn't like anybody was really going to get rich unless they were, like I said, if you're drafted in the top tier, top first round or something, and then, of course, you had some sort of long-term agreement. But I wasn't, heralded at that particular level. So you had to, my perspective was, hey, I'm here, I'm getting paid, I'm getting a free education, better take advantage of it, so that in the event you don't get drafted or don't get to play for any extended period of time, then you'll be able to take care of yourself and your future family. That was always what I was looking at.
David, what were some of the things that you were doing as a ball player that transcended into your business career to help make you successful, either in preparation or whatever?
Yeah, it was a lot of the things that, the determination that you had to have and the mental strength and fortification that you had to have behind you to believe that you could achieve, certain things or create a strong presence with a force on a football field. Sort of no one can take you down. No one can beat you. You've got to, make sure that you can push yourself, which motivated you in, say, the weight room and things like that. 1 second, let me get rid of this call.
All right.
Is that I noticed that with academics, probably about, I realized I had been in an honor society in high school, so and was a strong academician. So it was just a matter of applying myself, maintaining and transferring that energy and fire and confidence that you had on the football field is translating into competing. Felt like I was competing against the other students. So normal students that didn't have practice, that didn't have to go watch hours and hours every day of film, game study, because generally of every day on a college campus, an athlete has spent about maybe anywhere from 4 to maybe 6 or 7 hours, at the at the athletic program, facility. So you had to find time above and beyond what you had to give for specifically for the program that you were given the scholarship for, to insert yourself to make sure you had time to study. So I would take that, and of course, there's a lot of hours, like a regular student of, drinking a lot of, they didn't have energy drinks back then, but there was a lot of caffeine consumption so that you could study in the hours that that a lot of people take for granted. So long hours, and of course I did that because I wanted to compete, not only on the football field, but I wanted to compete in the classroom, and I didn't want to be there just barely getting by. I wanted to literally be able to kick other entities, other students, normal students, derrieres. That was the bottom line.
David, does the student athlete get a break in terms of academia, in terms of being judged? Does he walk the ball? Is there like a bell's curve because there's so much to do on the field, or is it the other way around?
I wasn't giving any breaks, and I didn't know at that time that you were a scholarship athlete at USC. They had some sort of code on the books. I realized that one time when I missed a class, and was asking to be able to miss an exam or something. I was asking, they were looking on the reference, and they could see that I was a scholarship athlete, and the professor said no privately, but did recognize that I was on this list that they had. So I never saw any concessions. Matter of fact, I had a huge chip on my shoulder because there was so much stigma attached to, unless you were a star athlete, if you were, on a football team, people were actually watching on TV, there might be a couple of students that might provide a little adoration or something. But as far as college professors, no, there wasn't any breaks. But I thrived in trying to make sure that, since everybody knew, or a large portion of people knew, that I was a student athlete, that I didn't want to be known as quote unquote a dumb jock. I think that was one of the strongest things that motivated me in my life, in my education. Okay,
well, just by talking to you, you ain't never going to be known as a dumb anything. I just want to tell you that. So, relax. David, if you were to give advice to a high school student about getting out there, getting your name out there, getting in front of assistant coaches who recruit this, that, and the other thing, what would that be? How could one stand out in a world where, talent-wise, there's a lot of it out there? And what did you do to make yourself?
Well, I wasn't really known. I walked on to USC in my freshman year, and wasn't aware that there were eventually there were facilities, because I remember talking to John Robinson, who was the head coach of the Trojans at the time, and I just literally walked into the office asking for a tryout, and not knowing that they'd won the national championship the year before I got there. So I just walked in. But remember, I came from England, and there wasn't exactly there weren't cable networks. So,
did you go up to Marcus Allen and say, Marcus, I'm here now? This is going to be tough on you, but.
Oh, wow. It ended up that because we were signed, and at the time, a lot of people forget he was a fullback, which is, blocking is sort of like a guard in the backfield. So, and I came there as one, and they used to group us together. So after that, I think during the first hell camp that we had for training for the season, we ended up actual roommates. They put all the running backs within a suite And then I just happened to be the guy that they assigned to be in the room with him. So we got to know each other pretty well, and, very nice guy. So, but
well, I live in Northern
see
California, and Marcus played with the Raiders for a long time.
Yeah.
And he came to, he was an adversary, if you will, of the owner of the team. God, I'm having brain gland. Al Davis, as a matter of fact. Can you shed some light on why they disagreed and what was that story?
All I know is what I've seen on a couple of NFL storylines that they do every now and then on featured players, and I knew that he was becoming bigger than the team when he played for the Raiders. And by the way, I was also motivated by the fact that I knew him so well, and that since I didn't make it, his annual, his contract was for $1.2 million at the time. Just had to throw that in there. I used that for a while.
That's all. Imagine what it would be like today.
Exactly. But I know that because he was so popular and so highly liked, and I know that as far as offensive philosophies, I guess there were some issues between him and the owner, and that's why they eventually ended up trading him. But he was an exceptional athlete. I do know to make a mix to take a little bit of the luster off of his star, that's when they brought in Bo Jackson, and they actually took Marcus, who had been the starting tailback, and made him, in order that they could balance the backfield with both of them, they made him a fullback again. So in the later years, they put him in there, and we're just giving all the press to Bo. So this is very, so I don't know why, but other than the fact that, like I said, I know there was some professional jealousy at that level. So.
Okay, we talk about Bo Jackson. It opens up a whole bunch of other stuff in my mind in terms of how players are taken advantage of. There was a book written about him. It's only a bruise, when he hurt his hip, and they lied to him. And is that the way it goes generally? Our players meet in the eyes of either the coaches or the managers or whatever. What should a player learn from from Bo Jackson's experience?
I would say, always have, if you make it to that level, you should, the old adage about getting a second medical opinion, because at that time I know they really exploited that, exceptionally. They just tell them anything and everything. Of course, the athletes don't know, because they've been cultivating an environment where you just always trust the coaches and your team trainers and everything else. But I do know that over the years, more recently, I would say the last 10 to 15 years, that ball players will go outside of whatever the medical assessments are and get their second opinion, because they have their own private physician. So I would never hesitate, and I would hope that at the high school level, they're doing that as well, especially parents, because you just never know, because especially if you're a very strong or exceptional talent, they want to keep you on the field as much as they can. But you'll notice that now, even if I'm watching a game, NFL game, they usually, like with running backs, which I thought was very rare, well, they just rotate them very frequently, and a guy will make one long run, and you figure, well, with their conditioning, they certainly can stay in there for the majority of the game or for the majority of the carries, especially if you're their primary running back, but
right.
They'll come out. And then you'll see him with an oxygen mask on the sidelines. And things have certainly changed. So I think it's a mixed bag. I think the athletes need to be able to be in there this is football, and it is somewhat of a gladiator sport. But at the same time, I think that if you do understand that you've got some sort of significant injury or something certainly isn't right, you know your own body better than some trainer that's on the sidelines that's pretty much paid to keep you on the field. So
right.
You've got to be a little bit selfish in that regard, I think.
And all players don't handle pain the same way, too.
No. I've got like I said, I played 2 years with Marcus Allen at USC, and then realizing, well, he was going to pretty much be there and I thought as a fullback for the duration, I did transfer to Fresno State for the last 2, which is a little bit closer to you. I was under.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
I played.
My son's father, as a matter of fact, my son's grandfather on his mother's side, Dr. Satin, was a USC professor or a Fresno State professor, I think back in the time you played. I wonder if that name rings a bell.
Give me the name again. Satin?
Satin. S-A-T-I-N.
I don't recall him. No. But
okay.
I'm a business guy, so maybe he was in a different curriculum altogether.
All right. What about living in Fresno? Was totally different than any place you ever lived. This is the middle of the Central Valley.
You really want to go there? Okay. It certainly was a transition from Los Angeles, a very rural area. I do remember because it's it's a concentrated, highly agricultural type of area, and I do know that Fresno State, the entire system at that time, Jim Sweeney was the one that did change it because of the perception out there, but it was more rural, more Okie type. There wasn't any glitz and glamour, but I had always been told that there were a lot of USC alumni that had moved out to that area, and they put a lot of money in that to elevate that football program. And my quarterback was Jeff Tedford, who's now the head coach of the Bulldogs. Very brilliant guy. And I knew that time they wanted to get or try and remove or lessen that moniker because they had so many athletes within the Valley that would come out that were 4- or 5-star athletes out of high school that would not go to Fresno State. They left, and a lot of them went to, Pac-12 or at that time Pac-10 type schools. They'd go to Washington, they'd go to USC, they'd go to UCLA. They would not stay there, and I used to hear that all the time. But that's because they felt like that was the big city as opposed to staying in Fresno, which with all the agricultural and it did have a bit of an odor, distinct fertilizer odor to it that just kind of
there was that.
City.
There was that, but more than that, there was a backwardness of the Central Valley in California that really remains to some level. And
yeah, it does.
Am I right about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I was trying to avoid that, but it was, you did feel, well, I'll tell you, I came out my senior year thinking, well, I was Fresno State's athlete, the football team's athlete of the year, student athlete of the year. I came out, was very proud of that, had very good grades, and I was in the business department. Plus, everybody knew I'd do speeches as for the football team. Coach Sweeney would use me because the graduation rate was like less than 5%. It was a joke at that time. But I was just like, well, I'm here. I'm not sure if, with the position I'm playing and whatnot, I did start, but wasn't sure about getting any opportunities to try out for the NFL. So I said, well, I better make sure and get my degree. I've already left SC, which, I did begrudgingly, but I did it thinking I'd have a better shot because I figured if I could walk on their team after national championship and get a full-blown scholarship that, was pretty much at that time and should be able to transfer anywhere and then launch myself to the NFL. But when I saw that was not going to happen, I said, well, I better make sure and hunker down and make sure I got my degree, let these guys pay for it. But once I ended up their student athlete of the year, thinking, well, I should be able to cherry pick the jobs I want. But then I graduated with a bachelor's of science and with a marketing emphasis, and thought there'd be all sorts of places that I could go. And I just figured I'd send out a couple resumes and life would be wonderful. And I didn't even get a polite, John Doe letter or anything. It was just like literally no response. But at the time, that culture was pretty much, hey, look, we imported you to play football alone, and it pretty much like after you were done, once your eligibility was up, they really didn't want anything to do with you. It was like a very closed culture. I was just like horrified. Even well-known football backers of the university, those guys, which are always, tied into you when you're playing. But once I went to a couple of them, that I think it was Duncan's Pottery or Duncan. He had some sort of play company out there. It was massive. He was the biggest booster. But I sent, resumes to him, and I got no response. So after that, I pretty much realized, okay, I have no ill will, but, I need to go back to Southern California. That's where my parents retired from the Air Force. So I was gone anyway, but I was disappointed because of that culture. It was a specific culture. I am now only interested back in Fresno State because of my former quarterback as the head coach, and I've reached out to him several times.
Right. David, you're a junior, and you have children of your own?
Yeah, I've got David the third. I've got 5 kids, and all great kids. Yeah, I didn't really watch television back then, but anyway, it's I've got 5 great kids, and I'm still helping.
What is, as a junior? First of all, this pressure on you just being a junior, I'm sure.
There definitely was growing up, correct.
Okay. What is it that your dad taught you that you pass on to your kids, and what is it that you have changed about that you do differently with your kids that your dad did with you?
It's still, with the military, I was taught a lot about responsibility for the family because growing up in the Air Force at that time, if you, as a child, it was looked at, especially, you managed controlled units, so to speak, that if you couldn't control your own household, how could you be assigned and control a fleet of men, or a department or a division? And I never wanted to. I took that responsibility seriously, and so did my younger brother. So we never wanted to bring any discomfort to him or have him lose a promotion or a stripe or something, because something that we did that was as a child that reflected negatively on him. So that was the biggest thing, is responsibility, because you would see, growing up in the 70s and 80s, you'd see kids that were more radical and didn't care, that might smoke, do marijuana, which was illegal at the time, especially on the military base. That if they got caught by the military police doing that sort of thing, literally the
idea, David, was not to get caught.
Yeah, exactly. But why take the risk? Because
absolutely. That is the $100 question. Why?
Yeah.
But not just that. With anything, we make decisions to do or not do things every day in our lives. And I'm wondering, when you talk to the kids that you tutor, what do you pass on about your experiences playing ball that they should look for? Or I'll just leave it at that. What do you, beyond the academia, you tutor them in whatever they're studying, but it's more than that. I'm sure it's counseling that kids need someone to talk to. What do you tell them? Do you tell them basically what you told me, which is great advice?
I don't look for anything, a free ride, or think that business or life is fair. It's even you could be 100%, as I thought, coming out of sports and having the fire of competition that I applied to literally everything in life. It didn't matter if I was playing, basketball with someone or whatnot. You always wanted to put your best product forward of yourself and push. But if the results don't come, you just have to literally, or if somebody that has power over you, say in a specific industry you're dealing with, which I had to deal with, was unfortunately, invisible ceilings, that sort of thing. Just take it up a notch. You got to find another gear and just press on. And then if it, you find a lot of cases that, in certain cases, say if you've got somebody that maybe they've got a really corrupt perspective, but they're, say, your superior in a business. In business, again, there's really they can claim that there's regulations, but you can pretty much, you lose control. And it's not always the best person that rises to the top. It's sort of like there is preferential treatment. But if you find yourself in a situation where no matter what, even after dogged perseverance, that if that's the case, sometimes you got to take a step back in order to move forward. Step back one, but you want to give you 100% of your effort first, so you know that it is not you or whatnot, but then you keep pushing and you find a different outlet or a different avenue. Sort of like a running back that if you see yourself going down a field, and a lot of times I was known for doing a lot of spinning and whatnot, or take a cutback. You take a step back, and then you go an alternative route. But then, yes, if you step away from a pursuing running back or cornerback, and then you step to the side, and then you see that you've got a unobstructed route in order to advance even further. And that's what I had to learn to do in business, which sometimes is fine because if you find yourself in an enemy where there is preferential treatment. But, really the whole perspective with students when you're teaching them, or I work with a lot of advanced officers of publicly traded companies too, that I coach them that, you've just got to look at your surroundings, and you just got to move forward and push as much as you can.
The teammate aspect of being a player did carry over into business for you, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It did. Yeah.
Any specifics about that you can offer?
Well, it's, again, when you look at, I could get technical, but just, when it comes to, when you look at it like it's like another field. It's another game. It's another, there's another stadium in the business entity. You've got different competitors. You've got different manufacturers. You've got to deal with things like pricing and marketing and that sort of aspect where somebody might be better within you or what your product is in a certain arena, but then you've got to modify your product, or you can mess around with lowering the prices of your product in order for what we call price penetration. You can you can do reverse marketing and find out where other people aren't, and then that's when you cater to that particular clientele. So there's a lot of juking on the field, modifications, altering your path, trying to figure out the best way to obtain your goal, and whether it's a touchdown or whether it's being able to accomplish or accommodate those particular investors or shareholders in order to provide yourself or bring yourself a lot more clientele. Okay, so.
David, you are so articulate, and obviously you're experienced. Did you consider coaching at one time?
No, I didn't. Unfortunately, my mindset was I saw a lot of people that if they didn't make it or didn't say to whatever the level was, maybe it was just to achieve the most you wanted to achieve on a college level, and had no ambitions of playing pro. But I did not have a passion for that because I thought that it was too obtainable, if it will, and I saw a lot of people that had lesser quantifiable gifts or education that could fall more so handedly and easily into that particular arena, and I was not impressed with it. And at the time, the pay scale for college, coaches or high school coaches and whatnot was not what it is today. Now it's just, and there are times now, I've looked at Jeff Tedford and I've looked at his salaries and whatnot, they're in the millions. So, we're talking even.
But that's like anything else too. How many coaches are there? How many assistant coaches? not everybody makes it.
Right.
So,
It's the upper
to that level, certainly.
Yeah.
Tell me about your other sports that you played, and if football was the sport that you loved the most, or was it the one that you were most talented at and that got you as far as it did? But would you have preferred baseball or basketball or some of the other sports?
Yeah, I kind of, baseball was much more of a pleasurable sport for me growing up. I had just as, I'd say, equal amount of success with baseball as I did, and I played it much longer than football. But I did like, as a running back, especially in high school, it was the I guess some of the prestige that came with the position and being so well known on that military base, and of course, to this day, some of my high school competitors from various different bases that I used to compete against, we're all still the closest of friends. I mean, it's like a unit. So I always enjoyed that much more. Now, as far as success that came with a tremendous much more effort, it was the wrestling, which was I was the British wrestling champion for 2 years in my weight class. So that was, I figured, my greatest accomplishment, as far as athletically. But I had opportunities to go to Ohio State as a wrestler. I had a coach in England that had the resources and the contacts, but the amount of effort that I would have had to put into that to maintain and to compete at that level, I thought was much more than I wasn't prepared to give at that time. But, and again, I didn't see it wasn't like there was a professional wrestling league or anything that, say, if I wanted to try and make a career out of it. And I certainly didn't believe that the WWF or any of that stuff was actually
that was
real,
not going to be for you.
Not going to be for me. So.
Well, it takes sticking tacks in your forehead to bleed and stuff like that. No. Thank you for asking, though. I'm sure you.
Really.
Let me ask you this, David. When you couldn't play sports, couldn't play competitively anymore, the motor was still running on some levels. What did you do for the competition? It's not all business, but
I tried after I graduated from college with my bachelor's. I did, went to. I thought, wow, what do I do? That sort of thing, and I looked at, I tried a couple of different jobs that were just typical jobs. I mean, whether it was like some kind of sales for auto parts or for airplanes, whatnot, and I thought, wow, I can do this stuff in my sleep. I didn't see it as being challenging, and I think that's what happens to a lot of these, at least just my theory, a lot of former NFL ball players, even like Junior Seau, how I grew up and was raising my kids in San Diego for the longest and going to sales, restaurants, and whatnot, thinking, wow, he's got a great life, whatnot. You'd hear him, you'd always read about him after his career was over, doing crazy things and whatnot, and then eventually committing suicide. But I figured I could relate to him in the sense that he could not find anything that was challenge him after that to create that spark. There's eternal adrenaline. There's adrenaline rush that you get when you're playing athletics that you can't really find anywhere else, basically because of the competition and whatnot. And I realized that I had a couple of friends that were stockbrokers, and I thought, well, at any given time in that arena, you can, make a ton or you can lose a ton. And it sounds like, and, it took a lot of effort to go and get the licensing and get sponsored by a firm and all of that. But that's how I ended up in the securities industry. So I've been licensed as a securities broker and investment banker for about over 30 years. So I found a home. I found where you had to be up in the office at 6 o'clock in the morning. You had to, the initial firm that I worked for only would recruit athletes. And I didn't understand at first. I mean, we had tennis players. We had basketball guys. We had people that were former professional ice skaters and whatnot. And what they did was they created an environment where whatever production you did on a monthly basis would go on a growth board at that time. So everybody saw it. It was all numbered. So, for example, you had 1 through 50 on the names. Everybody would be on this board, and you're walking in at the end of the month, and everybody's at zero. But it got the list according to who finished what where is from top to bottom, with the highest production to the lowest for the prior month. And you knew damn well, I mean, he just knew. They didn't push it or expound on it, but you did not want to have your name on the very bottom. You didn't want to be number 50. Hell, a lot of people didn't even want to be lower than the top 10. So,
well,
when it came
you know why they were recruiting athletes to get just that response.
Well, exactly. What I was leading to is that everybody was literally frothing at their mouth to be the number one guy. No one wanted to, so that was the competition, and we were a very productive firm, and I would put in, because they knew we were going to put in the hours. So unless you were a rookie and brand new, okay, it was fine to be maybe number 50, but for the most part, everybody would put in exceptional hours. There wasn't anybody that required us to be there, but we all had keys, and we'd be in there all day, all night, talking to new investors or talking to some of our favorite clients, whatnot. Always wanted to be out there producing and making things happen so you could be number one. So that's what
it's like reps. Doing the same thing over and over again, both athletically and in business. You got to do a lot of it. You just have to put that time in. And,
you did not want to be the guy on the lower guy on the rock. You just did not want to be that guy. And, of course, he knew and that we were all, highly competitive. And we were also always, and everybody was going to put in the extra work, that if you weren't as acclimated or as skilled as the other person, you're going to put in the extra time. So that's why it was very entertaining and it was very fun. So I found that energy. So that's why the transition to that industry, I found that was much more enticing than the average jobs out there. I couldn't even do those jobs. I'd fall asleep doing the work. So, sorry, it was a long-winded explanation, but I do that.
No, it was a great explanation. Let me ask you one final question, and we'll make this the first of many interviews. Hopefully, I hope you keep coming back and updating us on stuff. But I want to know, because it's such an issue in the pros right now, the head injury factor, and whether or not they talk about that at the college level, or they're concerned about that, or if there's research in helmets. Has that carried down, or?
I see that a lot now because of the threat of CTE, and then I thought that it wasn't until you get to the collegiate level that because of the heightened type of collisions, the size of the athlete, that sort of thing, that's where it originated. But apparently it's not, and that I've seen that there has been a lot more research and protective devices and whatnot that have been incorporated into the high school levels and even younger leagues to protect kids against that type of injury. So which I was shocked about. I just didn't see that type of impact when I was going through my younger years, but apparently there is. So, and then some people, there's been, some deaths. So I see that they are trying to push that. And again, even with my youngest, my son, when he was at that age that I saw through his high school, that the devices the helmets in particular were much more protective than what I experienced at that age.
Right. So they are aware of it, and
they're aware of it. Yeah.
Attempting to make progress.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Hey, David, you're a terrific interview. Have you considered going into communications at all?
Well, I do some marketing and I do a lot. I talk with a lot of clients, investors, and students and whatnot every day about very different subjects. So if I have the time, I might consider it. It's just that I'm trying to stick with what I know, and hopefully I can, make.
Well, you've got the pipes for radio. If worst comes to worst, the stock market crashes, you could always go into your local radio station and say, "Hey, hello, I'm David C. Adams Jr."
Right. Okay. Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for being here. You're a terrific guest, and you go on. I interview and talk to some of the most interesting people on the planet, and you're right up there, my friend, so please come back sometime.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Comfortably Zoned with Ralph Zig Tycho, the Zig Zag Man, and the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. The guest is David C. Adams, Jr. Thank you, David.
Okay, thanks. All right, bye.
Be well. Thank you for listening, everybody. Adios. The proceeding was a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production. Thank you for listening.